Should we start doing it? All right. Well, somebody tap Ed because he doesn't hear me.
Can you tap
Bob,
Ed
can you
because
just
he
tell Ed
can't?
we're gonna start? So introducing a new text, a new tune tonight. Adonai Oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo. Adonai Oz le'amo yiten, Adonai yevarech et amo. Shalom. Shalom. Adonai Oz le'amo yiten. Adonai Oz le'amo yiten. Adonai yevarech et amo. Adonai, Adonai, Adonai Oz le'amo yiten. Adonai yevarech et amo. Now we just chant in peace. Vashalom, Vashalom. We tried once more. Vashalom. We'll definitely revisit that melody and that text. Welcome and Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
So, Rabbi,
Cantor.
say a few things that are your things that are important, but save a little room for me.
All right.
Okay.
So I'll just do a quick announcement at the beginning because Cantor is going to set us up really with what we're going to be doing tonight. So hopefully everyone's grabbed a prayer book on their way in. If they don't, you can grab them there. Amy Winkleman is our usher tonight. She's one of our vice presidents. If you need anything, you can turn to her. Large print prayer books are available on your way in. Hearing assisted devices in the office on the right, which I'm assuming are working, correct? Somewhat. You can turn it up.
Kacha.
If you need, for any reason, an emergency exit, notice there's one here. There's also some toward the back, and of course, the way you came in. And bathrooms are through the office to the back, all gender and handicap accessible, though the men's and women's rooms are outside and to the right. Finally, if you see someone here who's a little bit lost, who may not know where they are on the page or in the prayer book, don't be shy about leaning over and showing them. That way we can all be on the same page, both literally and figuratively. And so, Cantor?
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat
To
Shalom.
all of you. In a few moments, we are going to continue, as we do, in chanting Shalom Aleichem, our usual Friday night text. But I want to take a moment to tell you a little more about this text. It is an interesting one. Peace unto you from our angels. It's really a musical midrash on a teaching from the Talmud, and the teaching imagines that each of us, every human being, returns home and we are readying our perhaps hearts and minds for Shabbat, and with us are two angels, the angel of goodness and, of course, the other angel. The angel that is the one of goodness is looking for an indication that we are readying ourselves for Shabbat, that it matters. And the rabbis imagined that if you ready yourself for Shabbat, you're sort of really investing your whole soul in this human endeavor. You're setting it apart in holiness, you're setting it apart in joy. But if you don't intend, and if you don't invest in Shabbat, then you leave yourself open, vulnerable to what the angel infused with what we call ra, or sort of evil brokenness, might do. You see, if the angels walk into your home and they see this is a place in which holiness is happening, in which this day is being set apart, in which for joy and for deep rest, this person or people are making it their business to care, then the angel of goodness, the flowing angel of goodness, is empowered, is sort of emboldened, and shares the blessing, may you come in peace, may you be blessed always with peace, may you leave this Shabbat with peace, and may you next week do it again. And in fact, by that sort of beautiful empowerment of the goodness angel, the other angel is made mute, temporarily, long enough for you to freely find your footing, your soul space in the Shabbat. But if not, the reverse happens, and it is the angel of brokenness that gets empowered. It takes a lot of work to invest in this Jewish thing, this Jewish life. It takes a lot of work to invest in Shabbat. It takes a lot of work to set your table. And it takes a lot of work to do those really subtle, nuanced things that help you pivot toward Shabbat, that help you shift and transition away from achievement and toward awakened, enlivened. The fledgling liberal Georgian Jewish community, try saying that 5 times fast, of which are few in number, but extraordinarily rich in their intention, have set their table for Jewish life deeply. Our Jagupi, say that word with me, it's fabulous. Jagupi. It means group. Jagupi sounds like almost. Jagupi, our group that traveled, made up of about 10 Ner Tamid congregants, and then one from New York, one from LA, a few from Israel. We were this ragtag, fabulous group of people. And you're going to hear a lot more about some of their experiences tonight. But what we felt when we were greeted, when we were embraced, was as if we were bringing the angel of goodness with us. It was like the table was set for us every moment that we were there, and we felt it as much as they did. Tonight is a night to celebrate what we learned, what we experienced, those of us who were so fortunate to travel, but what it can continue to mean to this entire community, to each and every one of us, because we are continuing to help this community unlock some of the doors of liberal Jewish life that have been locked and haven't been opened to anyone, let alone people who are hungry for it. And there are endless ways in which we are going to strengthen and build our bond. But for tonight, just for now, I want you to imagine that you are entering into a warehouse that has been unbelievably and lovingly transformed into somehow both an ancient synagogue and something that also feels very modern. And that we are being accompanied by so much love as we enter Shabbat. Not only our Ner Tamid Bloomfield community, but this sort of global connection that the wonder of Jewish liberal experience can really open people's hearts and souls and make it possible to live a more meaning-filled life. And we are the messengers of that. And it is exciting to be a part of. And so tonight, as we walk into Shabbat, let's bring them with us a little. Here we go, page 24. Shalom, shalom aleichem. Shalom, shalom aleichem. Malachei hasharet, malachei Eliyahu. Mimelech malchei hamlachim. הקדוש ברוך הוא בואכם לשלום, בואכם לשלום, מלאכי אליהו, ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך הוא, ברכוני לשלום, שלחי השלום, מלאכי עליון ממנה, מלאכי המלכים, הקדוש, הקדוש ברוך הוא, צאתכם לשלום, צאתכם לשלום, מלאכי השלום, מלאכי עליון ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש ברוך שלום עליכם, שלום עליכם, מלאכי השרת, מלאכי עליון ממלך מלכי המלכים, הקדוש, הקדוש ברוך הוא.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat shalom.
So one of the amazing things about celebrating worldwide Jewry, and today when we talk about a Jewish community in Tbilisi, Georgia, we are talking about a community worldwide that most people don't think about. They think about, of course, pockets in Israel, in America, maybe in France, but the idea of Jews in every corner of the world, all around the world, is something that many of us take for granted. And one of the ties that bind us itself are Jewish ritual. We, of course, read the same Hebrew, but even when we're speaking different languages, even when we're eating different foods, even when we're dressing in different ways, the idea that we're marking time in the same way really matters. That suddenly being around the world doesn't feel so far away. And so tonight, as we light our candles, every Shabbat as we do that, in fact, it draws us near and forms a connection with every Jew around the world who is doing the same thing. Maybe 6 hours earlier, maybe 6 hours later.
Or 8 or 9 hours.
Or 8 or 9 hours later. But nevertheless, it connects us through shared experience, through shared work, and through shared faith. And so there are many students also this Shabbat all around the world who are also becoming B'nai Mitzvah. And so I want to call Brody up to be joined by his family as they prepare to help us usher in Shabbat through the lighting of candles and the blessing of wine.
As these Shabbat candles give light to all who behold them, so may we, by our lives, give light to all who behold us. As their brightness reminds us of the generations of Israel who have kindled light, so may we, in our own day, be among those who kindle light.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu lehadlik ner shel Shabbat.
O source of light and truth, creator of the eternal law of goodness, help us to find knowledge by which to live. Lead us to take the words we shall speak into our hearts and our lives. Bless all who enter this sanctuary in need, all who bring the offerings of their hearts. May our worship lead us to acts of kindness, peace, and love.
We're on page number 5.
Baruch atah Adonai
Eloheinu melech
haolam borei peri hagafen.
Amen.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher tichanu b'mitzvotav v'ratzavanu v'shabbat kodsho be'ahava uvratzon hinhilanu. זכר למעשה וראשית, כי הוא יום תהילה למקראי קודש, זכר ליציאת מצרים. כי
בנו בחרת ואותנו קידשת מכל העמים, ושבת קודשך באהבה וברצון הנחלתנו.
ברך אתה אדוני מקדש השבת.
Amen. L'chaim. Shkoach.
You can take a seat now.
That's right. Thank you. Mazal tov. Mazal tov.
All right, we're going to move forward now. We join together in L'chadodi, page 20.
לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת תקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת תקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת תקבלה. לה לה לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. שמור וזכור בדיבור אחד, ישמענו אל המיוחד, אדוני אחד ושמה אחד, לשם ותפארת ולתחילה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לקראת שבת לכו ונלכה, כי מקור הברכה מראש מקדם נסוכה, סוף מעשה במחשבה תחילה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. verse 5. התעוררי, כי באורי אורי שיר דברי, כי בת אדוני עלייך נגלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. If you are able, please rise. בואי ושלום עטרת בעלה, גם בשמחה ובצולה, תוך אמוני עם סגולה. בואי חלה, לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת נקבלה. לך דודי, לקראת קלה, פני שבת
We remain standing, page 28.
ברכו את אדוני המבורך. Now be my echo. Baruch Adonai.
Baruch Adonai.
המבורך.
Hamevorach.
לעולם.
Leolam.
המבורך, ברכו את אדוני המבורך. ברוך אדוני המבורך, לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. ברוך אדוני המבורך, לעולם ועד, לעולם ועד. Once more, ברכו את אדוני המבורך, המבורך, המבורך. ברכו את אדוני המבורך, המבורך, המבורך. You may be seated.
We're on the top of page 31. Praise you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Your wisdom sets the way on which time and season glide. Your breath guides the sail of the stars. Creator of the tide of time and light, you guide the current of day into night. As heaven spans to infinity, you set its course for eternity. Praise to you, Adonai, our God, from whom the evening flows. Baruch atah Adonai, Hama'ariv, Aravim. Page 32.
אהבת עולם, בית ישראל, עמך אהבת, עמך אהבת. תורה ומצוות, חוקים ומשפטים, אותנו לימדת, אותנו לימדת. אני כן אדוני אלוהינו בשכבנו וקומנו, נשיח בחוקיך ונשמח בדברי תורתך ובמצוותיך לעולם ועד. כי הם חיינו ואורך ימינו, ובהם נגה יומם ולילה, נגה יומם ולילה. ואהבתך אל תסיר, אל תסיר ממנו לעולמים. ברוך אתה אדוני, אוהב עמו ישראל, אוהב עמו ישראל. שמע ישראל אדוני אלוהינו, אדוני אחד.
Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Page 36.
ואהבת את אדוני אלוהיך בכל לבבך ובכל נפשך ובכל מאודיך. והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך, ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך, והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך ובשעריך, למען תזכרו ועשיתם את כל mitzvotai, vitem kedushim leElohechem. Ani Adonai Elohechem, asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim, lihiot lachem leElohim. Ani Adonai Elohechem emet.
Over the course of tonight, we're going to hear from a number of people who are going to reflect on their experience and what they've learned as they traveled to Tbilisi, Georgia. Some of whom are going to introduce prayers. Others in the slot, which would be the sermon, are going to speak more formally about their experience. And so our first speaker tonight is Miriam Chilton.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And I suspect, like many of you, am a fan of Simon Sinek. He is a celebrity author, a speaker, who stresses the importance of knowing your why, understanding why you do what you do instead of what you do or how you do it. Before, during, and after this trip, I struggled with really understanding my why for this trip. There are times where I considered this simply as an adventure of a lifetime. I was going to an exotic part of the world that is a gateway between the East and the West, with cherished friends and respected spiritual guides. Sometimes I felt like I was on a mission to support the very first progressive synagogue in Georgia, where Judaism has been practiced for 2,600 years, but never had there been a woman who chanted from the Torah. Or was I simply on a personal journey of understanding what does interfaith work really mean and be able to partake in it in a very real way? I struggled not having a clear understanding of my why. However, when I came to this service the week I got back, I read the poem right before the Amida, which is in your prayer books. Standing on the parted shores of history, we still believe what we were taught before we ever stood at Sinai's foot, that wherever we go, it is eternally Egypt, that there is a better place, a promised land, that the winding way to that promise passes through the wilderness, that there is no way to get from here to there except by joining hands, marching together. This poem took me to Georgia again, to the rooftop of a Ukrainian refugee center run by the Peace Cathedral. Hand in hand, we sang Havdalah, using the energy to propel hope and possibility for the Georgian Jewish community, for the Ukrainian refugees, for the Peace Cathedral, and for a democratic Georgia. As we prepare for the Amida, I am reminded that often we do not know what lays ahead, nor is the journey always clear. However, when we choose to show up and choose to connect with one another, it is perhaps the best way to get to the promised land. I'm glad I showed up. I feel blessed to have made connections to our Georgian friends, to have shared experiences with my fellow congregants, and to have helped in some small way to nurture a Jewish community that welcomes and honors all. So Shabbat Shalom, enjoy hearing all of the wonderful reflections this evening and getting an understanding of our collective why.
Shkochach, and our collective freedom, right? Thank you, Miriam. We continue together with our freedom text, page 40. Ya yida yida yida, ya la la, ya yida yida, ya la la la, ya la la la, ya la la la, la la la, ya yida yida, ya la la la, la la. Mi chamoch ba'elim Adonai, mi kamoch medar b'kodesh, nora tehilot osefele, nora tehilot osefele. Malichutecha ra'u evanecha, ukei hayam lifnei Moshe u'Miriam, zeli anu ve'amru, zeli.
Let's hear you.
Adonai Yimloch le'olam va'ed Adonai yimloch leolam vaed. One more time on ya dai dai ya la la ya dai 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 ya la 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 ya la la ya la la ya la la יללה ונאמר כי פדה אדוני את יעקב וגואלו מיד חזק חזק ממנו ברוך אתה אדוני גאל ישראל.
We're on page 42, and I'll invite you also to turn your attention to the screen.
השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ושמור צאתנו ושמור צאתנו ובואנו ובואנו לחיים ולשלום מעתה ועד עולם. מעתה ועד עולם. Sometimes I lay under the moon and I thank God I'm breathing, and I pray don't take me soon, 'cause I am here for a reason. Sometimes in my tears I drown, but I never let it get me down. So when negativity surrounds me, I know someday it'll all turn around. So all my life I've been waiting for, praying for the people to say that we don't want to fight no more. There'll be no more war, and our children will play.
Let's hear you.
One day,
One day,
one day,
one day,
one day. Let's hear you. One day,
One day,
one day,
one day,
one day. השכיבנו אדוני אלוהינו לשלום והעמידנו שומרנו לחיים. ברוך אתה אדוני הפורס סוכת שלום עלינו ועל כל עמו ישראל ועל ירושלים. So I get to take one more moment to tell you about a really exciting thing that happened to me while I was in Tbilisi. So before I went to Tbilisi, I, along with several other people in our community, taught B'nai Mitzvah hopefuls, as I like to call them, how to chant a kriya, or a reading of Torah. We did it by Zoom. We did it with a lot of laughter and a lot of pointing. And then we got to be together and share something that we had already begun to do the work with. One of the things that was really exciting to me was that every student was given the encouragement to find their own creative voice as a way of adding and embellishing chidor mitzvah, making even more of the commandment. And there's one student for whom speaking in English was better than my speaking in Georgian, but we struggled with the language a little, except we shared the language of music. And her name is Nina, as a musician, as a singer, as a soulful person, we had a lot of deep connection. And so the night before we were about to celebrate Shavuot and then into Shabbat, Nina said, I wrote a song. And I said, teach it to me. And we sat down at a table and took the guitar out, and she began to sing her own setting of the text that we chant every Amida, Adonai Sfatai Tiftach, Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. God, open my lips so that I can say words of praise. Let me open them for me. So she set this tune, and we figured it out, and then we had this light bulb idea. Let's also do it in Georgian. And so tonight, we are going to sing in Georgian and Hebrew. I know I had to pick two tough languages. And Nina is now going to have her composition, the first of its kind, right, of a Georgian Jewish take on tefillah, but also outside of Georgia, here in this United States, and here surrounded by sort of the love of exploring Jewishly. And though she's probably fast asleep, she knows. She knows we're doing this tonight, and I'm certain she's feeling it. So here's how it goes. Adonai Sefatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha. That's the Hebrew. Here's the Georgian. Upalman mertma damido bageni rata vadida mididi deba. I invite you to rise. Yaidarai, yaidarai, yaidarai. Once more, Adonai Sefatai Tiftach Ufi Yagid Tehilatecha Upalman Chmertima Gamigo Bageni Rata Vadida Misidi Deba. We continue praying privately, and when you are finished, we invite you to find your seat once more. invite you to keep praying privately. Let your prayers flow. Don't stop them up because we're going to offer this prayer for peace. Let them be lifted even further up. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amicha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amicha Tasim Leolam. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Ki ata hu melech adon lechol hashalom. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amecha Tasim Leolam. V'tov be'enecha livarech et Amecha Yisrael b'chol rit u'b'chol sha'ar b'shlomecha shlomecha. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Shalom Rav al Yisrael Amcha Tasim Leolam. Tasim Leolam. So our next speaker is John Block. I'm not going to give anything away. John, come on up. He's going to help lead us into our Mishaberach Lecholim.
So my experience in Georgia was as stirring and provocative as anything I've ever experienced, and even now, 3 weeks later, I can't fully explain it to myself, but I thank you for the opportunity to attempt that. I, along with Oliver Mead, was one of the filmmakers on the trip, and leave it to others among us to talk about Georgia's exceptional wonderment, history, and unresolved future. I want to talk about the hike, which I think was billed as a pilgrimage to an ancient cave city that was once a major religious center. It was led by a man who I'd begun to suspect was one of the great ones, Bishop Malkaz Sangyulashvili, I still can't pronounce it, who founded the Peace Cathedral. The excursion he'd invited us on was one he takes often, and he does so in sandals. The fit 60-year-old bishop owns no shoes. As it happens, our walkabout occurred in the aftermath of a rainstorm. The view was breathtaking. The walk was breathtaking too, or rather, breath-ransacking. The oldest of our group had instantly dropped out. The next oldest, me, did not. As we trudged uphill, all our footwear became encased in pounds of mud. All, I believe, except the bishop's sandals. They were clump-free. Everybody could handle the hike better than I. I was recovering from COVID for the second time in 3 months, and my energy was soon depleted. Rabbi Golan's concerns somehow inspired me forward, and when we finally caught up to the group, Bishop Malkaz announced that we had just completed the pre-hike. Now, he said, the actual hike would begin. I started to laugh. Ha! You're kidding, right? No, he was not. So onward we hiked, past plush hills and valleys, the most dazzling I'd ever seen. But honestly, I couldn't care less. And I cared still less when it started to storm, then hail. With no place to shelter, we trudged on, slipping and sliding. I re-experienced my dreadful toddler days, schlepping around with a full diaper. Others benevolently carried our film equipment, including Amy Friedman and Amy Winkleman. I'm sure there were others, but I was so spent I couldn't put names to faces. All I could think about was what I'd recently been telling family and friends. I want to make movies until my last breath. Holy smokes, I didn't mean today. I convinced myself that this was karmic payback and that stinky, clammy, old before my time me would be airlifted home in a box. But as we continued to chalk up frequent flyer miles, we finally moved to more level ground. I got cocky and turned away from my mud-encased shoes to glance at my phone, to stupidly check the weather in Montclair. And that's when I took a spill and twisted my knee. I thought, now I'm really cooked. I didn't want the group to know of my agony and tried to hide it. I limped on for more hours. I think we totaled 11 miles. I'll skip the in-between part, the regal meal that was prepared for us, and the affectionate toasts sprinkled throughout. When we returned to the bus to head back to our hotel, I fantasized about the mattress and blanket that awaited me. As we began to disembark, Bishop Malkaz approached. "Wait here for me, John," he said. "I'll be back shortly." "Okay," I answered, uncertain why I was now being left alone in the darkness. When he returned a few minutes later, the bishop presented me with a tube of ointment. "Rub it on the infected area," he instructed. "I promise you'll feel better in the morning." I was touched and confused. The bishop had so many other significant thoughts and feelings and near-time members to fill his head. Plus, I thought I'd done a better job of disguising my discomfort. To the bishop's credit, he was right. The next morning, I did feel better. A few days later, I flew home. Upon my return, Bishop Malkaz contacted me twice to inquire about my knee. Even though I am still a tad miffed that he did not give some forewarning about what lay ahead on our hike, now I am sure he is indeed one of the great ones. On that note, I'd like to invite all of those who know of someone in their hearts who could use some of that love and compassion for healing to say their name as we sing the prayer for healing with all of those in mind.
Thank you. Turn to page 253 as we each time gather together for this opportunity. Mi sheberach avotenu v'imotenu, Avraham, Yitzchak, v'Yaakov, Sarah, Rivka, Rachel, v'Leah, hu yivarech et hacholim. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebekah, Rachel, and Leah, bless and heal those who are ill. May the Blessed Holy One be filled with compassion for their health to be restored and their strength to be revived. May God swiftly send them a complete renewal of body and spirit. And let us say amen. And there's a listing here as well. Misheberach avotenu Mekor habracha limotenu. May the source of strength, who bless the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say amen. Misher berach imotenu Mekor habracha Avotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen.
So even though tonight we're learning from those who went to Tbilisi and we are celebrating their journey and what they did, we have other celebrations in our community as well this week. And so in addition to when we called Brody up and had him lead us in Kiddush, we have 2 new members of the tribe, 2 people who have now formally joined the Jewish people. And by the way, you're going to be hearing me do this a lot over the next year because there's like, I think, 11 to 12 more that are currently in the pipeline. But the first set of this kind of class of students are ready and joined us in the mikveh this week. And so I want to call Sparkle and Victoria up to receive a blessing. So in anticipation of tonight, I was thinking about the fact that sometimes when, and I always encourage students who convert to come on a Friday night for a blessing after the day of their conversion, sometimes they're strangers because, you know, they don't come to services a lot. They do other things within the congregation. People don't know them. The 2 of you have put in the time to be here on Friday night, that you are not a stranger to this crowd. This crowd knows you, they love you, they care about you because you've taken the time to know them, to love them, and to care about them. But I want to say a word about each of you and something that people may not know. So Sparkle, I want to begin with you. As we talked about your theology, as we've talked about your relationship to God, who God is, what God is, you brought up this idea of Ubuntu as a very significant, important way that you see the world. And for those who don't know, it's a philosophy that says, I am because you are. This sense of interconnectedness, this sense of being because people are in your life. You care for them and they care for you. And when I think about you, and we talked about this actually on the day of your conversion, I think about your connection to community. The fact that you jumped in, the fact that your kids feel like all of our kids, the fact that you were just present, that you were here, you are friendly, you make friends so easily, and your warmth just pervades the room. And you get not only where God is in that Ubuntu, but you get how to live that. And our community is a product and benefits tremendously from the fact that you do. And Victoria, you've heard me give this teaching because you never miss a Friday night. But recently I gave this about a different student who's graduating, and as I thought about you, I thought you are exactly the same. There's a teaching that just as a fish goes after every drop of water when it rains as if it's new food, the Torah scholar should go after every new piece of wisdom because it enlivens and enlightens them as if it's their first. And you read faster than anyone I have ever worked with. We would assign a book to you, and then within days I would get an email from you. That was amazing. Do you have another one? You have this thirst for knowledge, this thirst for learning. And to enter into the people of the book means that you are going to engage so much with this 3,000-year-old conversation. Your eyes sparkle when you see new ideas. And we are blessed to have your ideas now in the mix formally as part of our people. And so I want to invite every single one of us to rise as we offer you the priestly benediction, the oldest blessing that we have to give in the tradition. And I'm going to invite Cantor Greenberg up to give this to you with me.
No, you can look at us too if you want. Yivarechecha Adonai v'yishmerecha.
May God bless you and may God protect you.
Ya'er Adonai panav elecha v'yaseh panav elecha v'yichuneka.
May God cause God's face to shine upon you and give you grace.
יישא אדוני פניו אליך וישם לך שלום.
May God always smile upon you, granting you a life of wholeness and peace.
כן יהי רצון, may it be God's will, and let us all say, Amen. Mazel tov.
Mazel tov.
Oh my goodness. So glad you're casting your lot with us.
You can be seated, except for our speakers. We've got 6 of them tonight. I think they probably know the order, though. Should I call them up one by one? All right. So we're going to actually begin with our Zoom speaker. So Ken Cohen, I want to invite you to the screen, and then we'll call up the rest who are here in person.
Shabbat Shalom. The interfaith activities that took place in the Peace Cathedral raised up and made me aware of biases I hold, some subconscious and others more on the surface. I realized them as I reflected on an interview I gave, one of many that John and Oliver did during our visit. I answered a question spontaneously, and that brought those biases to the surface. We had joined a Juma service on Friday in the mosque at the Peace Cathedral. I sat respectfully on the carpeted floor, but didn't prostrate myself as the leader did. I probably wouldn't have had anyway, just like I wouldn't kneel in a church, although I would attend the service. But I did think to myself that I don't know what he's saying. Participate, certainly not to bow down. But then on Sunday, we joined the Christian service for Pentecost. And during that service, there was a fair amount being said or sung in Georgian. I didn't understand that either, but didn't feel as uneasy about it as I had in the mosque. So my takeaway is not to be critical of myself, but rather to understand that these biases are there, and the way to address them and move forward is to do what we did, to be proximate, physically proximate with people across lines of difference, and to be in dialogue without fear and open to what can come from it. One other quick note is kind of a sweet note, which is that I've chanted Torah many times over the years and in many different places. But this time at the Peace Synagogue within the Peace Cathedral, I was the first person to read Torah in that Peace Synagogue. And as I chanted, while I usually pay very close attention to what I'm reading, this time I took my time and looked around while chanting to take in the moment. And I definitely felt something different, almost momentous. I'm glad that I had a chance to go with everyone, and I look forward to hearing what the others share about our wonderful experience. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you so much, Ken.
Shakah.
I think Amy Winkleman's on deck, or she's ready. Okay.
She can come on up.
So I have the experience that a lot of us had, that it's so hard to explain what happened. It felt like magic, and it still feels like magic, but I really want to, I mean, Miriam talked about a struggle, and it feels like a struggle, but it is such a delicious struggle, and it's sort of like going halfway around the world and finding family you didn't know you had. And I'm going to try, I don't think I'm going to do a good job, but I'm going to try to share with you, because I think they're your family too. I think there are so many opportunities going forward for us as a congregation to connect with these people in Georgia, the fledgling, what was it? Fledgling liberal Jewish, what she said, that. And also this amazing community of Baptist bishops, not those Baptists, let me just say, not the Southern Baptist Conference, but these two amazing, their whole congregation, but these two Baptist bishops who we were so privileged to get to know, and they feel like family now. So I want to just tell you a little bit about them. John spoke so beautifully about Bishop Malchas, and he's one of the two bishops. The other one is Bishop Rusadon, who is his niece, and also the first woman to be consecrated as a bishop in Georgia, which is a very traditional society. So I first met, I think we all met Bishop Malchus on our first day in Georgia. And for me, I arrived a little bit later than some others, and I joined the group at a restaurant in Tbilisi for the first of what was an endless parade of amazing Georgian feasts. Ask us to tell you about the supra when you have a lot of time to listen. So we arrived at this amazing feast that was going on in the restaurant, and this man in a black shirt and black pants came over and poured endless cups of amber wine into our glasses, and also this strange green soda, which I guess is the Celery tonic of Georgia. I really liked it. Not everyone did, but and you might have thought he was a waiter, except that he had a long white ponytail and a very long white beard. So it was Bishop Malchus, and I learned very quickly it was Bishop Malchus, and I'd never had a bishop serve me beverages before, so it was kind of a new experience. And the fact that he didn't look like a bishop, as I imagine a bishop would look. Later we would see him in a series of amazing and very colorful robes, and at one point even a crown. But the way we were first introduced to him, I thought, was spoke so much to who he is. He was understated, and he tended to undersell things, including his own amazing scholarship and knowledge. And he had such a dry sense of humor that even when he was dressed in amazing robes and a crown, he never took himself too seriously. And I came to think of him as a cross between our own Freddie Pressman of blessed memory and Professor Dumbledore of the Harry Potter series. And I hope we get to see the slides together, because you'll see what I mean when you see his picture. Yeah, so please stay for the slideshow. And he did tend to undersell himself and the situation. As John said, the day before we took the hike, he said, you should get a good night's sleep tonight. And I said, how long is this walk? And he said, oh, it's not very long. And I said, is it in the mountains? He said, oh, it's all flat. So yeah, he really undersold that 11-mile trek through hail and mud. The other times, though, that he and Bishop Rusadan really undersold the experience or understated the experience was so humbling and inspiring, because it was only gradually that I got a sense of the scope of the incredible work that they do. And it's really tikkun olam work, the work they do to champion the rights of women, to champion the rights of the LGBT community. Bishop Rusadan told me an amazing story about how she and others surrounded queer activists in Tbilisi in what was an attempt at a pride celebration, and how a mob tried to attack these people, and they were only really saved by the police. But it just kind of came up in conversation, as things do. They really undersell the incredible work that they do. And the other really profound example of the incredible work that they do and that we can also help with was something that Miriam talked about, which was the work they do at a center they have called the Beth Eli Center, which is a complex of buildings that we learned was originally established by the Peace Cathedral, by the Baptist Church, to house refugees from the war between Russia and Chechnya I think it was around around 2000. And I only learned later that there was a historical enmity between the people of Georgia and the people of Chechnya. So it was only more of a sense of how amazing it was that they opened this space to house refugees from Chechnya. And now they house refugees from Ukraine. And we got the opportunity to meet those refugees, including a man named Sergei, who has taken it on himself to create beauty out of ugliness and to establish a ceramic studio in the Beth Eli Center where these Ukrainian refugees live, we toured the ceramic studio where they create beautiful tiles and vases and replicas of synagogues and mosques and churches. It's beautiful, beautiful ceramics. And they sell them in the city to raise money for their own community. And we also got a chance to tour the beautiful garden that Sergei has created on the compound of this center. They call the studio Cool Babka, which is a really cool name. And I love that it means dandelion in Ukrainian. And I learned that they call themselves, this group of ceramicists from Ukraine, they call themselves the dandelion people. They have been forced to leave their homeland as a result of the Russian invasion, and they've been scattered in other places around the world. And they see themselves like dandelion seeds that can put down roots and beautify any space that they're in, the same way that dandelions can thrive in all kinds of different environments, usually my backyard, it seems. But I was so moved by their resilience and so touched. They served us a feast after we visited their ceramic studio. They served us a feast of the best borscht I've ever had and amazing potato dumplings. What were they? Veroniki? What were they? Something like that? Yeah. And they kept plying us with food. And then, as Miriam talked about, we all celebrated Havdalah together on the rooftop or on a balcony of the Beth Eli Center, underneath a fresco depicting the three angels who visit Abraham's tent. And it was such a moving experience to really feel like part of a single human family. And I really do feel we made a bond with the people we met in Georgia, and it's one that we can continue to develop. Among other things, if you're interested in helping to support the ceramic studio, they need a new kiln. They have one, but it's pretty lame. They need a proper kiln, so to fire their ceramics. So if that interests you, please come see me. And I really hope that we find ways. I think Cantor already has a million ideas for us to continue to connect with the Jewish community and with our Baptist brothers and sisters. Thank you.
So our third of 6 speakers in this sermon slot tonight is Leslie Nobler. And Morty, I guess, is also. Oh.
He's my Vanna White picture show. Yeah. Well, Shabbat Shalom, everyone. So I thought about this, and I decided there are those of us who find a way to faith through the aesthetics of a prayer, situation, and or a place, and the feelings they engender. Perceptions through sights, scent, sound, and touch can draw you into the experience in ways that can't quite be put into words. Aesthetics are my way into faith and shared culture. So I took note of my perceptions of the comparative prayer spaces. There was musical beauty in all the formal services, even in the Islamic service through the chanting of the imam. We didn't get to hear the Yazidi music, but we saw photos of beautiful ceremonies and instruments used there, not to mention their peacock. More on that later. The Baptist celebration of Pentecost had music, rich music, interwoven throughout. It used scents of pine and fir trees, branches of which covered the entire floor, and incense constantly refreshed around the room, in addition to scented oils and a fire on the altar, which was continuously, constantly ablaze. People will laugh about that. Touch was engaged in subtle ways. You can use the next one. No, that one, yeah. Touch was engaged in subtle ways. The rich fabrics worn by pious leaders or by the Torah, inscriptions and carvings on walls, and where the floor is used in worship, the soft feeling of silk and wool. In the Peace Synagogue, the rough-hewn rock walls transport one back to ancient Israel. Fortunately, before leaving, I took part in making Judaica that we brought for the synagogue members. We worked over several days to create patterned silks and tied tzitzit into woven shawls, yes. It was so gratifying to see the B'nai Mitzvot and the Shamashim wearing these colorful talitot. And then I tried to make more sense of all the other visual stimuli all around. Eye-grabbing motifs might appear anywhere. We're almost done. Tbilisi architecture is all over the place. Medieval, neoclassical, Beaux-Arts, Art Nouveau, Stalinist, and even modern. Parts of modern-day Georgia at various points have belonged to the Persian, Byzantine, Arab, Mongol, Turkish, and Russian empires. Hence, it reflects this and more. Building, textile, and furniture embellishments suggest Islamic roots. I saw mind-boggling patterns that owe their invention to Arabic mathematics and geometry, even in the Jewish Orthodox temples. There is a uniquely Georgian style as it incorporates complex geometry and Christian symbols. So this was in a church. Some Christian and Byzantine art even includes the iconic Islamic 6- and/or 8-pointed star seen in many churches. Add to that, we need the peacock again. Add to that the Persian influence, which incorporates Indian and Chinese features, and the visual experience is enormous, is massively multicultural, all in one place. I constantly come back to the Peace Cathedral as a metaphor for not only interfaith, but intercultural peace. And how interesting that the Yazidi peacock, its core symbol, represents not only the rainbow's multicolors, but the world's diversity. Through our senses is how we feel religion, but feeling liberal Judaism in this country and with this special and motivated group was a strong and beauty-filled lesson, long overdue. Okay.
Well done, Morty.
We'll hear from Morty shortly. Amy Friedman is our next speaker.
Apparently, all my co-travelers have printers, and I don't. For many of us, and certainly for myself, the appeal of this trip had to do with the maiden voyage vibe of it, the first. And there were so many firsts happening, and you've heard some of them. The work of the Peace Cathedral in and of itself, the under one roof synagogue that we were there consecrating, and the first time women were reading from Torah and B'nai Mitzvot in a liberal context. And then for me, and what I'm going to share with you is a little bit the other side of the coin of what Kenny shared, which was our sort of consecration in a sense of the mosque that is all under the same roof. And this was a first in that it was the first time that non-Jews and that women were being invited into that space. So we received context before, and I think it's helpful for you to kind of be in my head with that, which was that we were being invited into this mosque, that we would take off our shoes, that we would be invited to pray, but no pressure, and that the prayers would be modified for our benefit so that we would not inadvertently, as Kenny was saying, be saying words that would be antithetical to our beliefs inadvertently, sort of like the inadvertent idea of accepting communion when you're not realizing it. So, phone just died, hang on, not died. So as Miriam also said, one of the big understandings of this trip from both Golan and Meredith and Johanna, who ran the trip, was that they were not going to give us answers, that they were going to invite us into experiences, and we were going to come up with our own answers. And it's true what Miriam says, the struggle of what exactly are we doing here was an ongoing one. And so I went into the mosque with a plan to not have a plan. I really did not know how I was going to feel. I was going to go with the flow. The other thing about me, which some of you know, is that I am a very spiritual person, but I am not a religious person. So when I love Judaism and I love the learning and the laws and the celebrations and the bagels and all of that stuff, but when the word God comes up, for me, I always do a little silent little adding of the O, and I just think good. I add the O, and for me, I'm like, yep, I'm with my people celebrating the good of the world. So we go into the mosque, we start to pray. We were also there, by the way, with a group of amazing Christian college students from Macon, Georgia, the state, not the country. And they were brilliant. So I was sitting next to this amazing woman who I had spoken to before, this college student, and when the imam started the prayer, I must have made some sort of physical motion because she sort of poked me and said, if you're gonna pray, you have to sit on the line. And I was like, huh? And that's when I realized that on the rug in front of us, there was this embroidered line. And if you were gonna pray, you sat in the line and you were lined up with everybody else. And I did it. So I got on the line, and I gotta say that lining up in physical space with people, I got like a little zing of the good. Remember, I am not religious, but I'm like, this is interesting. And I went with it. And I repeated the words, and I opened my hands to the universe, and I got in what, for me, is mostly child's pose, you know, forehead on ground. And it felt really, really, really good. I, though, went in, I want to say, like Kenny, I really did go into this experience thinking about Homeland. And when, for any fans out there, like when Brody is praying in his garage, that's our tell that, like, he's a terrorist. And I do want to say that some of us in the Temple Nur Tamid group watched respectfully, and that was their line. And some of us started praying and stopped because they felt uncomfortable. And some of us continued to pray. And for some of us, seeing the others of us praying like that was a little weird. And I have Jody Redoran's approval to tell this story, which Jody and I are very close friends. And Jody was really weirded out by seeing her dear friend Amy Friedman, with whom she shares so many sensibilities, religious, cultural, feminist, culinary, humor, praying like that. It was just weird for her. And for me, and you could talk about that, Jodes, but for me, the whole point of this trip was being invited into an experience, truly invited, being given a true choice about how you're going to participate or not. But then I think the key for us was that then to be given space and time and a structure to process it. And that is what I want to talk about. This experience led to some of the most terrific debates and conversations. And I will leave you with the rubric in my head that was shared with Jody and Kenny Cohen and our friend Tony. Hi, Tony, if you're watching this, wherever you are. In Israel, exactly. So this experience for me enabled me to articulate what I've always felt, and this is it for me. And you can hate it, you can love it, you can debate me, let's keep debating, it's so much fun. But picture an architectural drawing from above, and picture 3 rooms, Judaism, Christianity, Islam. And each has a door, and they have walls, and we are neighbors but not roommates. And those walls are very important, and those walls make us different, and those differences are absolutely critical. But at the far end of each of those 3 rooms is another door, and those doors open up and lead to a river. And that river, to me, is what we were doing that day. We all got into that river, and once you're in that river, it's just this one thing. And so for me, doing this thing that made some of us feel uncomfortable was, for me, really the essence of this whole thing, because I feel like I felt never more Jewish, I felt so connected to the good and the God, or the whatever I want to call it. And I hope that it makes me a better Jew, and I'm pretty sure that it makes me a better neighbor in those rooms. And Shabbat Shalom. That's it.
Thank you. Rob Rosenberg.
Shabbat Shalom. So there are Jews in Georgia, the country. Who knew? I gotta see this. That is the simple summary of my initial response to learning about this peace project, peace synagogue mission in our Garrett. That was it. Except there were so many questions. Where is Georgia? And I know there are Jews everywhere, but how did they get there? And when and why? And the answer to each question led to 2 or 3 follow-on questions. Before I knew it, and very, very quickly, I had fallen into the rabbit hole. And the more I learned, the more everything I learned resonated with me. My sense of adventure, my sense of community with fellow Jews, my desire to support progressive causes, and underneath it all, a growing recognition that the reason why all these things resonated with me was the values I had absorbed from my mother and my father, trailblazing progressive Jews themselves. It made me want to honor them by taking action, like they did 40, 50, and 60 years ago. So, Georgia. First of all, it is wedged between the Black Sea and the Caspian Sea, and between the North and the South Caucasus Mountains. And if these are helpful reference points that tell you where Georgia is, please raise your hand. So it's like a place behind the looking glass. It's almost mythical. It's protected, it's insulated. It's a real-life brigadoon. And it's a place where Jews have lived, as people have already said this evening, and mostly thrived for at least 2,000 years, maybe 2,600 years, following the destruction of the first temple by the Babylonians. That's how far back this goes. And certainly Jews were there before the split between Ashkenazi Jews like me and Sephardi Jews like I think is also in my family tree as we know it today. Protected in their brigadoon, their culture promised to me to be a time capsule of our ancient selves. Turns out, this promise mostly does not pan out. During the brief period under Soviet rule, many assimilated, and when they could, the majority of the remaining ancestral Georgian Jews emigrated to Israel and to Queens. True. The Jewish population dwindled. It was large. It was almost 100,000 people 100 years ago, maybe a few thousand today. And when the Soviet Union crumbled, that Jewish vacuum was filled by Chabad. Ashkenazi Jewish traditions replaced much of what was left of that ancient Jewish tradition. So to me, this was disappointing from a historical perspective and also a social one. The established Jewish community in Georgia today is much like it is in Israel. Israel's Jewish community is, in my view, insular and Orthodox, and only Orthodox, almost. Conservative, not permitted in Georgia. Reform, not legitimate. Egalitarian, not at all. So when I learned that there was this fledgling group of mostly young Jewish families who had essentially disaffiliated themselves from their Judaism because they didn't resonate with Orthodoxy, but were now trying to create their own option by forming a progressive Jewish community in Shul, who were hoping to call women to the Torah for perhaps the first time in 2,600 years, I thought of my daughters and my mother and my bubby, and I said, not only this I gotta see, but this I gotta help. How can I help?
our final speaker is Morty.
Shabbat Shalom. I was first drawn to the Georgia Peace Project when Cantor Meredith called in mid-January to ask if I would tutor 2 of the B'nai Mitzvah students for chanting Torah on their big day. My 2 students were a young married couple, Mikhail Grishashvili and Ketivan Chikviladze, a.k.a. Misha and Keti. A very lucky draw indeed. Both are Shamashim of the New Peace Synagogue. Misha is its flagship president, and Keti is director of Hillel in Tbilisi. Without a doubt, one of the most rewarding parts of my own Georgia experience was spending time tutoring and getting to know Misha and Keti. Amidst our studying over Zoom, 5-year-old Benjamin might be found watching cartoons in the background, or Keti would sometimes pop up on screen holding adorable 15-month-old Esther in her arms. Between sessions, I watched video posted to the Hillel Facebook page. We shared Kabbalat Shabbat, our Purim spiels, yes, they do a Purim spiel, a real one, and Pesach Seders. Keti confessed that she's scared to death about singing in public. Misha was concerned about rising anti-Semitism in Georgia and the pushback he and Keti had already received from the Georgian Orthodox Jewish community on the practice of liberal Judaism in Tbilisi at the Peace Synagogue. And I learned a bit, too, about the lingering effects of communist rule and a Russian influence that permeates the Georgian government today, but is unwelcome among the citizens who rather see their future aligned with Europe and Western values. Tangible excitement, theirs and my own, started bubbling up in our Zoom sessions as the time for our trip to Georgia grew closer. And when at last the day arrived, on Shabbat morning over Shavuot 5783, the holy day our ancestors received Torah at the foot of Mount Sinai, in the company of their fellow B'nai Mitzvah, their new liberal Jewish community and supportive guests from other faiths, in their new home for worship, Beit Knesset HaShalom, Misha and Keti both chanted from our ancient sacred Torah confidently and splendidly. As he came off the bima, Misha spontaneously thrust out a hand to lay a joyous, resounding high five on me. I jumped up from my front row seat to receive it, a 2 bros and a tallis split second of time I will always remember. I never did ask Misha what he was feeling at that instant, but I'm sure it was part relief, part triumph, but most of all, an enormous sense of satisfaction rooted in the significance of what he had just accomplished for himself, for his young family, and for his new Jewish community. A miracle, I had heard him call it more than once before, in Tbilisi, Georgia, his home, with its complicated history as context, and now new hope for a future that Misha himself was helping to shape in his lifetime, and maybe keep dreaming well beyond. And I, of course, as the high five recipient, felt proud and gratified to have played a small part in all of that, and to have been recognized for it by my new Georgian friend in that jubilant moment.
Thank you so much, Morty, and to all the speakers. Wow, it was wonderful to hear. After the service, we'll, I think, have you grab some food and then come back in and watch the slides of, if you'd like, of the photographs. And I do want to say that Misha and Keti are going to be coming and visiting us in October and spending Shabbat with us and having moments where we can connect. And I'm excited to be able to give you more information about that eventually. And just keep looking out for all of the ways in which we're going to continue to connect.
So we're going to move to the conclusion of our service, though the service continues as we talk to each other about these experiences.
Indeed.
Page 282, we rise for Elena.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula liotzer breshit, shelo asanu kigoye haratzot, velo samanu kamishvachot ha'adama, shelo sam chelkeinu kahem, v'goraleinu kechol hamonam, ואנחנו קוראים ומשתחווים ומודים לפני מלך Malchei HaMlachim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz. Bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad. Ushemo echad.
Please be seated. And before we move into our Mourner's Kaddish, our final prayer of the evening, a brief reflection by Jody Radorn.
Shana said this is like the confirmation class, except for grown-ups, where we're all doing our little thing. So thank you for your patience. Many of you know that I've been saying Kaddish for my father every day since his death in February. I've said it here with my kids' Hebrew class and with our Muslim friends at the Passover break. I say it on Sunday mornings at Shomrei Emunah and on Friday mornings at B'nai Keshet. I've said it on Zoom with our Torah study group every Saturday, and I've said it in a bunch of places with a bunch of people in a bunch of ways that my father never would have imagined or really understood, especially on this trip to Tbilisi. It started on the way there during our layover at the Istanbul airport. It was almost midnight Istanbul time, and we'd missed sort of a whole day of Kaddishes. So I said that I was going to zoom into this My Jewish Learning Minyan, and Kenny, Miriam, and I had just finished dinner, and so I put my earbuds in, and Miriam joined me, and we sat at this table in a food court in an airport and had a little Torah study, and then said Kaddish D'Rabbanan. So that was our start. And then we arrived at Tbilisi at our hotel around 5 in the morning, and I couldn't fall asleep. So around 7:30, I went out for a walk to go to one of the 2 remaining synagogues in Tbilisi, both of which are Orthodox and very old-fashioned and kind of dying. I went to the first one, and it was not right, and so then I went to the other one, and now I was late, and I went to walk in. This is at a synagogue called Beit Rachel that's kind of off of an alleyway, and this guy outside freaked out because I didn't realize that there was a women's entrance from the outside, so I was accidentally going to walk into the men's area. So he pushed me where I was supposed to go. I went up to the balcony. It had these very tall kind of lattice wooden gates that you couldn't see over, and the davening was, I think, Sephardic and very fast, and I could barely even keep track of when they were saying Kaddish. So I was a little bit demoralized, but I went back to my hotel and caught a little bit of breakfast, and then we set out for the day, walking through the old town of Tbilisi that you've already heard about. And that night, we had our first services for Shavuot. And when it came time for Kaddish, Rabbi Golan did that thing we're about to do now, where he looked around the room and asked everybody to say who they might be remembering. And I was kind of shocked when Bishop Malchas listed his parents and grandparents, and so did everybody else in the circle, including a bunch of non-Jews. And I was sort of, as Amy has already pointed out, a little bit freaked out by that. I thought, this is for us, this is our thing. But this was, as Amy talked about, a very new kind of interfaith trip. So we all said Kaddish together, I was thinking about my dad, and I guess Bishop Malchas was thinking about his father, who was the bishop before him. I had mentioned to Rabbi Golan before the trip that I was saying Kaddish and that I'd hoped that I'd be able to say Kaddish every day. And maybe because of that, or maybe not, honestly, he incorporated into each days, he did these kavanot or kavanas, where he would have a few moments of teaching, and then we would end with a Kaddish. And the way he incorporated it rather naturally into his teaching moments, that meant that we said Kaddish on a street corner downtown in the middle of the madness of Georgia's Independence Day celebration. It meant we said Kaddish outside the museum at Joseph Stalin's birthplace, which actually seemed kind of appropriate given how many people he killed. And our guide told us that 1 in 3 Georgians today have a grandfather who was killed by Stalin. So we said Kaddish for all of them. We said it on the top of that mountain that John told you about during the pilgrimage that was supposed to be 6 miles, but turned out to be I think 12, and included the hailstorm and the mudslides that you already heard about. And I definitely was right there with John thinking about, during that Kaddish, thinking, please, let's not add any new people to our list, people needing Kaddish said for them. Each time, Rabbi Golan would frame the Kaddish as a prayer, not just for the people who had passed in the last year or the last month, but as a way of honoring all of that our ancestors through time had done to make way for this experience we were having right then, and to make way for the Peace Synagogue, those 2,600 years of Georgian Jewish history that we've been talking about that didn't include women and did birth these people who now are trying and experimenting with this egalitarian approach. Each time I would hear Miriam and others whose parents had died years ago saying the Kaddish with me, I heard our new friends, Tony and Jillian, whose husband and father, Peter, had died just a few years ago, saying it with me, and also Bishop Malchas. So at the end of Shabbat, we went to the Bethel Center, as you've already heard about, so I'll skip this part. And Rabbi Golan and Bishop Malchas took us to show us this pomegranate tree that they had planted a year before, right after Rabbi Golan's father had died. He was also a Rabbi Golan's father, and he was one of the founders of the House of One in Berlin, which is an interfaith effort, which is really how Malchas and Golan met, and I guess how we ended up in Tbilisi in the first place. So Malchas explained to us that the pomegranate has significance in many religions. We Jews know, we always talk about this legend that every pomegranate has 613 seeds, and I think this is a way to keep our children busy. We try to make them count them while we're cooking for holidays to represent the 613 mitzvot. In Islam, it is the tree of paradise, and in Christianity, it's a symbol of the unity of creation, he taught us. When the fruit is open, it is fractious, but when it's closed, it is whole and one. And many of us bought a lot of pottery with pomegranate symbols on it in Tbilisi. Also, in his typical understated humor, Malchas also told us that pomegranate is one of the only trees that you can plant in Georgia in June and have a chance that it will make it through the summer. So I like that one. On the way back, I said my last adventure travel Kaddish, again during our layover in Istanbul. We were sitting in the lounge this time, and I went to the bathroom and found a, what was it called? Non-denominational prayer room. I thought, okay, that works for this trip. So I went into the non-denominational prayer room with my computer and my phone. It was a bare carpeted room with a single chair, and there were some disposable prayer mats, I think, for Islamic prayer. So I called Amy in to see if she wanted to do her thing. No, I'm kidding. I'm just joking. Anyway, it seemed, I was pretty sure as I sat there zooming into the B'nai Jeshurun morning minyan in Manhattan, I was pretty sure I was the only one who'd ever done that. But maybe not. That's what I have.
So we recall this Shabbat the following individuals, and I'll invite you to rise as I call your loved one's name. Ida Abrahams, Max Bass, Alfred Berman. Devorah Bernstein, Gabriel Friedman, Edith Friedman, Louis Gans, Edith Hirsch, Harry Cantor, Stanley Kaplan, Sylvia Lainoff, Adam Lucino, Kurt Meyer, Adele Ullman, Gertrude Reback, Pat Riley, Zachary Rosenfield, Emmanuel Sachs, Elaine Safeman, Helen Siegel, Leonard Silverstein, Leon Sallow, Rosita, Margarita Lima Souza, Anna Stein, Nathan Zeisel, and Saul Zenek. And those who are in their Shiva and Shloshim periods of mourning, Zoe Levinson, niece of Warren Levinson, Erwin Natter, father of Merrill Natter. In addition, I'll invite you to rise if you're observing a yard site that wasn't on this list or you are within your 1 year period of mourning. We turn together to page 294 and we rise. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, bi'amad divrach yirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayachon uvyom echon uv'chayei l'kol Beit Yisrael b'gala uvizman kariv v'imru amen. Yehi shmei Rabba mevarach le'olam omei amaya. Yiparak v'yishtabach v'yipar v'yitnomam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalev v'yitalal shemei dekudesha barechu le'elam min kol birchata v'shurata tushbachata v'nechamata damiram b'alma v'imru amen. Yehi shalom Rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Oseh shalom b'ramav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru. Please be seated. So it's very late, so I'm not really going to give any announcements other than to say this is the last Shabbat of the year until after Labor Day that you will be seeing the cantor and I up here leading. We'll be cheering from afar, but we move toward our lay-led services for the summer. There's still a few spots if you want to chant some Torah, if you want to give a sermon on a Friday night. We have spots available for you. And so come find us. We need leaders, and we'll plug you into an opportunity. So with that, we're going to end with a call for peace. We'll grab some food, and if you want to come back in to watch the photo montage, you can do that afterwards.
Thank you. Thank you, band. Use shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu. Use shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu. Use shalom bimroma, uyase shalom aleinu. Yase shalom, yase shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Use shalom imroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Use shalom imroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Use shalom bimroma, hu yaseh shalom aleinu. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Once more. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom. Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'al kol yoshvei tevel v'imru amen.
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat shalom. Go grab a little bit of food and then come back in if you're interested in seeing some gorgeous photos.
And meet someone new.
And meet someone new, especially. Shabbat shalom.